Well, all that was left was bread, and that's because they collected it. They were ready for this. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says, you do it. The famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold it unto Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. When the famine got severe in the land, they had all they needed, and the government made an immense profit, frankly, because they were withal to sell it back to the people. The people gave it to them. The people gave it to them at 20%, and then they sold it back to them. That was nice, wasn't it? Smart thinking. Because when you're starving, you'll pay for it. Look at verse 57. Not only were the Egyptians buying this, but all countries came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was so severe in all the lands. So here we have the design of an income tax system. Now look over at chapter 47. Genesis 47. Interesting, isn't it? Man, I never knew all this until I started studying it. How did I get this out of Genesis? How did I get this out of Romans 13? Amazing, isn't it? I use in my studies, I don't preach the Old Testament. What I do, the Old Testament illustrates a New Testament principle. The Old Testament are stories that are illustrations of principles that we find the principle in the New Testament, and now we find principles, and the principle is already in the Old Testament. Now look at chapter 47, right, Richard, verse 13. And you have even a further indication of this beginning in verse 13. Got it? There was no bread in the land. The famine was severe. The land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money found in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money to Pharaoh's house. Verse 26 says, Peggy?
And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's.
That Pharaoh should have the fifth part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. And those that were religious were set aside for this taxation. Everyone else paid 20% tax. That became Egyptian law. This is good research, isn't it? Now, you say, how do you know this was an institution of God? Did God set this up? Because it was God's servant Joseph who instituted it. Joseph was God's man, and he himself instituted it, and he learned that from a dream that Pharaoh had. And God was setting a pattern for future governments whereby they could take the resources from their people who had the resources and disassemble them back to the people when they were needed. Take it from the people. When they need it, we'll give it back to them. You know, I still haven't understood that in my lifetime, when I was young and had kids at home, I always got money back. I got $1,200 for each kid?
Right.
Man, I enjoyed that. Every year I didn't pay any taxes, but I got money back for having kids. I haven't figured that out yet. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I didn't pay any taxes, I got taxes back. That's not right. Anyway.
Where are we at in Where's Becky at?
Where are we at? Where are we at?
I'm
Chapter
getting lost.
47.
Genesis 47.
We're chapter 47.
It's not
We're
what my
down-
Bible's saying, I'm trying to follow.
46.
We're down at verse 13. And down to 26. That's Egyptian tax. Now, you say, I already said that, didn't I?
Find it, Urchin.
46:13.
And 26. So government is,
47.
we are chapter 47,
47.
verse 13,
Okay, I got that part.
and then verse 26.
47, 26.
Okay?
47, 26.
Yes.
So, government is truly an institution of God because who instituted this program? Joseph. And it began way back in the early days of the book of Genesis, and it incorporates the concept of taxation. Now-
Pastor Charles, it also says it in 24.
Okay?
And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the fifth part unto Pharaoh, and 4 quarts shall be your own for seed of the field and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food for your little ones.
Now, when God established the nation Israel, did He have an income tax system? Sure He did. Go to Leviticus. Go to Leviticus chapter 27. Leviticus. Leviticus, what did I say? 27. 27. Leviticus 27. Isn't this interesting? No. 30. Leviticus 27:30. Chapter 27, verse 30. And here we find taxation initiated in the land of Israel. And this became the essential part of their life. I suppose we could start in verse 30, actually. But verse 26 begins to discuss it. It says, all the tithe, not that tenth, not a tenth. That's a word that simply means 1/10. It's not even a religious word. It's a mathematic term. And the tenth of the land, whether of the seed of the land or the fruit of the vine, it is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. That is set apart for Him. If a man will at all redeem any of his tenth, he shall add thereunto the fifth part of it. In other words, if you say, I don't want to give the grain. I don't want to give the grain. People saying that all, I don't want to give a tenth. I don't want to give any of my money to God. I'd like to give money instead. I don't want to give my grain, I'll just give money. Then you had to add a fifth to that. Because they wanted the actual commodity. And concerning the tenth of the herds are the flock, and so forth and so on. And it goes on to describe all of this, that they were to give a tenth of everything each year. And this was called the Lord's tithe, based on verse 30. It's the Lord's, it is holy unto the Lord. Now sometimes it is even called the Levitical tithe, because the tenth was given to the Levites. And we know that from Numbers chapter 18. After further study, Numbers chapter 18. In verse 21. Numbers 18:21. And 24. Numbers 18, 21, and 24. That this was given to the Levites. Now, who were the Levites? Levites was one of the 12 tribes, right? And when the land was divided among the tribes of Israel, the Levites received no land because they were not to be agriculturalists. They were to be priests and to attend upon the matters of worship. And so they did not support themselves, but as priests, they were to be supported by the people. That's where this brilliant idea came, that preachers are to be supported by the people. They are not out to be working in public work. They are to give themselves to worship. And that's what I thought growing up. Duh! I thought that God called me to preach. I would pastor, and then people in the church would support what I do. Duh! Some churches do very well. And I asked Dwayne Haynes and Alan Harris, why is it that you feel that churches ought to support you in ministry? Why do you feel that you're asking churches to support you, and when you come into town, we take up a love offering to help you? Why do we need to do that? Because we don't do anything else. Alan Harris has not had another full-time job or a half-time job in 35 years. He does his full-time. He's supported by, when he goes into Holder, and he went to a church he came to this church. He goes to Dwight went to a church in Oklahoma, and 5 people were there. I mean, 5 people couldn't give him much. If they gave him anything, he went as a mission. Well, very interesting. So here in the land of Israel, everybody paid taxes, and it went to the Levites. Why? Because they were the priests. And the priests in those days functioned as rulers and judges and leaders of the nation. And we find that didn't in the time of Christ. Who was in charge of the nation Israel? The priest.
High priest.
The high priest. We find that in Christ, and the chief priest, and they were ones in charge. And that goes all the way back to the time of the Pentateuch and the time of Moses. The priests were responsible for maintaining government. So they made a decision about the people. Now, so they were supposed to be a theocracy. Israel was supposed to be a theocracy. Theocracy. By the 10% that was given each year, known as the Lord's tithe. Malachi 3:8. Malachi 3:8. Now, not to give this was to commit a serious sin. In the 3rd chapter of Malachi, the prophet condemned the people of Israel because they hadn't done it. And he said in chapter 3 of Malachi, verse 8, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me, and you say, how have we robbed thee? In tenth and tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. So people didn't pay their taxes. Just like today, people don't pay their taxes. Matter of fact, I read somewhere recently that there is $93 billion that was owed to government taxes was not given. $93 billion that America owes the government. Somehow they just chose not to give it.